to review another article quickly from the education sector. This one's about how to effectively teach research and writing skills to undergraduate students. So the article details are that it was written by Al-Hamdi and Durrani in 2018, and the article is entitled Teaching Research Skills to Undergraduate Students Using an Active Learning Approach, a proposed model for preparatory year students, that's the year between high school and university proper, in Saudi Arabia, and it was published in the International Journal of Teaching and Learning in Higher Education. So the problem that Al-Hamdi and Durrani were investigating has two elements. Firstly, their research focuses on Saudi Arabian high school graduates entering university. And the observation is the students are poorly prepared for essay writing and that they struggle to learn the skills of essay writing. The authors then note that most of the people entering this sector, their schooling, meaning their high schooling, prioritizes memorization and rote learning. And in the process, the students become passive learners. In other words, they sit and someone tells them what to do and to think. And their writing experiences are limited to what the authors call a stream of consciousness approach, meaning pretty much writing the thoughts as they pass through your head and jotting them down, as opposed to intelligently and systematically organizing thoughts in order to support a key idea. Very interesting to me is that they argue that although the Saudi students entering university work in English as a second language, the problem as they see it is not really that they're writing in a second language. The problem is that the people have never learned to write well-argued, well-structured essays in their first language. And so then to do it in a second language, of course, introduces even more difficulties. In terms of their theoretical framework, they want to test whether active learning, in other words, if the university embraces an active learning way of teaching writing skills, will it change the experience that they're having? Now, active learning is defined as students talk and listen, read and write, and reflect as they approach course content through problem-solving exercises and a variety of other activities that require students to apply what they are learning. The key word, of course, is that students aren't passively sitting listening to a lecturer and then writing a test in which they reproduce the information they've been given. Rather, they are constantly working and thinking and engaging that information, trying to make sense of it, put it together in sensible forms. The authors also work with a social constructivist approach. This is very well known in education theory. It's the learning theory in which students construct their views, taking ownership of the learning process at the same time. Now, active learning happens, so they say, when students explicitly participate in the attainment of knowledge. Students are engaged in advanced thinking patterns which include production, assessment, and analysis. So they set out to test whether if they use these kinds of methods to teach first-year students coming into university how to write better, will it produce better results than using the traditional chalk and talk method? So that brings us to their methodology. What did they actually do? Well, they were working with a research and writing course, and they divided the students into two groups. The first group was taught using the traditional chalk and talk method. In other words, lectures, assignments, examinations. And generally, this methodology focuses on memory of content. The second group was taught using the principles of active learning. Now, this was a classroom-based training exercise, so they were putting these principles into practice, not primarily online, but primarily in a classroom-based space. And what did they find? Predictably, the group that learned research and writing skills using active learning principles and methods improved significantly more than those who were taught using traditional approaches. Now, that doesn't come as any great surprise. So, a couple of takeaways for us from this article. I think many undergraduate students have the same challenge. Their formative years teach them to learn passively through rote memorization and reproduction of what they've learned, and little training in how to write well. And the takeaway here is that if we want to help people to write well, we need to use methods that help the students to be actively engaged in the process of critical thinking, writing, formulating ideas, reworking them. An active approach is much better than a lecture-based approach. This is good news for online education. It's not necessarily the case that contact education has passive learning, but it's much more likely that contact education defaults to passive learning. Whereas when you're learning online, you have to be active all the way through it. Of course, there are relatively better and less effective ways of doing it, but if it's done well, active learning is a more effective way of producing growth in writing than traditional classroom-based lecture-style teaching.